Do you want to win your fantasy league? If so, keep watching. Today, we're going to talk about 5 players you need to make sure you draft in your fantasy football drafts. We'll talk about quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and a tight end. And we're going to start with this 2nd to 3rd round pick, Aaron Jones. Jones currently being drafted as the 11th running back off the board in pick 24. Now, everyone wants to avoid Aaron Jones, and it's for one reason, large in part, A.J. Dillon, the guy behind him in the depth chart. Now, same thing happened last year. A.J. Dillon was going to come on in his 2nd year. Everyone wanted to avoid Aaron Jones. And what happened? Well, A.J. Dillon did run for more yards than Aaron Jones last year. Granted, it was only 4 yards. But still, Aaron Jones finished as running back 11 in fantasy football. Both Jones and Dillon, top 12 in red zone touches. And now they enter the season without Davante Adams. Adams had 28 red zone targets last season. Aaron Jones averages 22.9 fantasy points per game without Adams. That would have been 2nd most per game in the NFL last year. Aaron Rodgers has even talked about this preseason in training camp, saying they need to get not only Aaron Jones, but also A.J. Dillon on the field at the same time. These are 2 of their best players, and the Packers desperately need playmakers. And Jones is one of their biggest they have. And if you're so concerned about A.J. Dillon, well, Aaron Jones scored more points last season with Dillon active than without him active per game. Jones, one of the best touchdown scorers the NFL has to offer. Look at the last 3 years, 19, 11, 10 touchdowns. Don't be surprised if Jones gets in that top 5, top 8 at his position. He's going as running back 11 off the board. I think that's a little bit too low. Give me Aaron Jones, one of the most consistent scorers out. The next guy I want to talk about is a tight end. Now, while all of us would love to leave our draft with Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, have that set it and forget it guy, people are sleeping on this guy. I'm going with him. Dalton Schultz, currently being drafted as tight end 6 in round 7. Now, will Schultz outscore Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews? Likely, probably unlikely, but he's still tight end 3 last year. There was only 2 guys that scored more points than him, Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, and he had 78 receptions, 800 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Now he's 26 years old, playing on the franchise tag this season. So he's going into the next offseason. He wants a big payday. He's going to go out there and try to earn it and give it his all. But not only that, the competition for targets, much less. You look at Amari Cooper from last year, traded to the Browns. Michael Gallup, still in Dallas, but rehabbing an ACL tear. Probably not going to be there for week 1 and maybe a couple weeks after that. James Washington, a guy they signed. He got injured on August 1st and out for 6 to 10 weeks, likely out the beginning of the season. Jalen Tolbert, he's a 3rd round rookie. Really, you got CeeDee Lamb out there, sure. He'll get his. He's going to get a large amount of the defensive focus on him, but he'll still get his. But Schultz was the security blanket for Dak Prescott last season. I imagine he is again that this year. Just look at this consistency from Schultz. He had 10 plus fantasy points in 11 of 17 games. So sure, he missed it by 6. Granted, 2 of the games he missed, he had 9 points. But you look at the top guys at the position. Mark Andrews did that in 13 of 17 games, having double-digit fantasy points. Travis Kelce, 13 of 17. So the fact that you're getting a guy almost 6 rounds later than some of those guys. Travis Kelce going in round 1/2, and Mark Andrews going right behind him about a round or 2 later. But look, you're getting a very reliable, consistent scorer here in Schultz. I'm going to probably try to get him on all my fantasy rosters. Make sure you take him when you get the chance. If you don't get one of those elite top guys at the position, Schultz is going to be pretty elite, pretty consistent this year. The next wide receiver is being so undervalued, I feel like it's stealing. But first, smash that subscribe button. We are donating 10 cents to St. Jude for every subscriber we gain this month. It's free. Go with that subscribe button. Also drop a like too if you want to. Let's get into the next player, Allen Robinson. Now, Robinson currently going as wide receiver 32 off the board, pick 83. Now, Robinson, let's be honest, terrible last year. You drafted him, you might as well just thrown away that draft pick. And he was an early one in most drafts. You finished as wide receiver 81. 80 receivers were better than him last year, but that was pretty bad. What was also bad? Well, the passes that were thrown to him. You look at it, 72nd in catchable target rate, 77th in target quality rating. This was still a guy that was top 15 in win rate versus man coverage. It's getting open. Justin Fields and the Chicago QBs couldn't hit him. Now, injuries played a role last season, but he's coming into this year fully healthy with the best QB of his career, Matthew Stafford. He's going to replace Robert Woods in this offense, who's now in Tennessee, and you look at Woods. He was a fantasy rock star with this Rams offense. Here are Woods' fantasy finishes the last 4 seasons. 2021, we're only going up to week 9, because that's when Woods tore his ACL. Back in 2021, before he got injured, he was wide receiver 12, 2020, wide receiver 14, 2019, wide receiver 14 again, 2018, wide receiver 11. I understand. Cooper Kupp is still there. He'll be the number 1 guy, score a ton of fantasy points, but the Rams paid this guy, Allen Robinson, over $15 million a year. They're going to need to make it work out, and I think they will. Look, Robinson was the wide receiver 8 in 2019, wide receiver 9 in 2020. He's been there before, just had a bad year. That happens to all of them. I know he's getting older, but in round 9, This is absurd value. Take it, Allen Robinson, and run with it. Feel like you're stealing, don't worry about it. You'll be able to brag to all your league mates at the end of the year when you got Allen Robinson on your squad carrying you. Let's talk about this next guy that you can get even later, 3 rounds later in round 12, Trey Lance. Now, if you wait to draft a QB, I know some people want to go out there and get, the Mahomes, the Josh Allens of the world, but if you're going to wait, this might be the best guy you could target to wait because, like I said, going in round 12, 13th QB off the board, pick 110. Now, if you're maybe in like a 10-team league, maybe Lance doesn't get taken, but he probably will be starting for a team by probably the middle of the year. You look at Lance entering his sophomore season as a QB last year. He had to sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo. He did get into a couple games, but this is the era of Lance. They've basically told Jimmy Garoppolo, go get a trade, go find a trade, we'll trade you there. And so we're going to see Trey Lance at the helm. And Lance started only 2 games last year, but when I talk about the 3 games he actually played a good amount in, he averaged 18.7 fantasy points in those 3 games that he played a lot in, scoring 20 plus fantasy points in 2 of the games. What I like most about him, he's got a very, very high floor, very Jalen Hurts-like. We'll talk about him in a second. He averaged 10.3 carries per game in those 3 games. And the 2 games that he actually started where the game plan was all centered around Trey Lance. You weren't going through the week like, oh, is Jimmy Garoppolo going to be out there? Then Jimmy Garoppolo starts, gets injured, and you're like, oh no, we got Trey Lance. We don't know what to do. In the 2 games that the game plan for him, he had 57 and 22% of the 49ers carries that game. The floor for Lance will be crazy, just like Jalen Hurts last season, who was a top 10 fantasy QB. Despite not being very good in literally any passing category for QBs, he was still a fantasy rock star. Lance is going to have some growing pains, but draft him. You won't regret it. Trey Lance is going to be a fantasy rock star this year. Round 13, QB 13, absolutely. Lock him in. I'm all in. Let's move up a couple more rounds to the 2nd and 3rd rounds for this guy, Javonte Williams. Now, in his rookie season, Javonte still had a pretty good year, RB17 in fantasy football. He's being drafted a little bit earlier than that. People expect big things. But in that year, 903 yards, 4 touchdowns, hauling in 43 receptions for over 300 yards and another 3 touchdowns. All of that while playing less than 50% of the snaps for his team. Now, it is expected that Javonte is going to take a little bit more of a workload, maybe he gets up to that 65-ish%, which would be awesome for him. Imagine how much better he can do than RB17 than what he did last year. Look, even his backfield mate, Melvin Gordon, he made that indication, saying that Javonte was their guy, and that's what he's expecting coming into this year. Melvin Gordon will still get his, he'll still be a little bit annoying, but Javonte Williams was great. He broke tackles last year like it was going out of style. 8th in juke rate, 6th in evaded tackles. This guy was breaking a lot of tackles every single run, just kept going for 6, 8, 14 yards. This guy was just going through guys and really gaining yards. And we've seen this offense was terrible last year. Now this offense gets a big upgrade with Russell Wilson. You love to see that. This offense should be able to move some drives, get in the red zone, and cash in on some touchdowns. We've seen Russell Wilson make fantasy usable running backs in the past. Not just usable, very elite running backs. Just look at Chris Carson. He was a fantasy rock star. He was scoring touchdowns left and right. You just always saw him in the end zone. Large in part due to Russell Wilson finding him. I really like Williams. This might be the last year. You could ever get him in like round 3 as the 12th running back off the board. Take him now. Next year, you probably have to look at a top 6 running back. You don't want to do that. Take him, at least reap the rewards for 1 season before Javonte Williams costs you a 1st or 2nd round pick next season. Javonte Williams, absolute fantasy rock star, a fantasy beast. We're counting on him this year. If you wanted a 6th player, I can tell you all about Gabe Davis. His ADP continues to rise. I absolutely love him this year. Last time we saw him, he scored 4 touchdowns. But if you want to learn more about Gabe Davis and 4 other wide receivers that I think could win you your league, click on this video right here. You want to check it out. A lot of fantasy football content coming to you guys before the season starts. Only a couple weeks away. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Austin, I'm signing out. Peace.